Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Elevation Association Experience Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dan Nelson, with my co-host, Dr. Jared Hill. Welcome back. Jared, this is, dude. I think we need to do a two-part on this topic because for two reasons. One is that we're continuing our KPI and our metric discussion, but also because it's a hot mess in the industry right now, man. And what we're doing, we're talking about hygiene right now.
Yeah, I love the hygiene department discussion. This is, excuse me, this is a hot topic, like you said. It's one of my favorite topics to discuss, and I think part of it is because I struggled so long with my hygiene department. Meaning, I always felt like I was fighting with them. Like, do you want us to do this? Do you want us to do that? I just want you to be productive. I want you to do whatever. But it was never, it was never smooth. We never really worked together. I felt like it was always a fight until until we changed a few things in the hygiene department, and now it's our strongest department, and it really is a motivator for production in our. It's an engine that drives production within our practice. So yeah, I'm excited to dive into this today. It'll be great.
So for this episode, and I really do want to like break it down into because I think on another episode we should talk about the hygiene shortage and some of the new laws that are getting rolled out. We just saw Arizona pass a law that said that assistants can be doing cleanings, super gingival cleanings, and basically following the military model of a prophy tech. And I think we're going to continue to see that trickle out through different states. So I think it'd be cool to talk about some of the stuff that's happening and how we can mitigate some of what's going on as far as the shortages and the challenges and the exorbitant salaries that are eating into the overhead, turning hygiene into a loss leader. But I think let's talk about instead today. Let's talk about how we can transform hygiene from being a loss leader into a real asset for the practice via KPIs. Let's jump into some of those. And before we do that, Jared, I've got a couple here that I think would be helpful to kind of go over. So just some quick percentages to kind of set the stage. And we look at these a lot within the practices we work with, right? But some of the things we want to look at is if you're listening to this and you're looking at your own hygiene, a couple of KPIs you want to track is hygiene pre-appointment and hygiene reappointment. And those are different, right? So hygiene pre-appointment are the patients within your practice that currently have a hygiene appointment. Hygiene reappointment is the percentage of patients that are reappointed when they leave the office. So they are leaving with a new appointment because they're there for their hygiene appointment or there for a appointment. Your perio patients percentage, so your perio percentage, the perio visit percentage, again, that's different because perio patient percentage is the base of your patients that are perio, and the perio visits is how many are coming in for perio visits. Fluoride percentages and hygiene production are some of the ones that we like to track. So that's setting the stage, as it were.
Yeah, so I think we need all this is rethinking the hygiene department. This is a profit center, not a service. It's a service. Yes, we're providing a service, but we need to consider the hygiene department as a business within a business. So you're the practice owner, you run a business, you have the restorative department as a business, but the hygiene department also needs to be a business and needs to be productive. Sometimes it's I think people cop out and call it a loss leader, but it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, it's a lot of work and headache. As a matter of fact, if you consider it a loss leader, I think that leads to burnout. One of the key contributing factors for a burnout for a dentist is when they struggle with their hygiene department and they consider it a loss leader. So I think let's look at this as like a profit center and how it can generate recurring revenue for your practice. So all of those KPIs that you talked about are fun. It's we should probably dive into each one of those just real quickly and talk about how those affect the hygiene department and then the practice overall in general.
Well, Jared, okay. So when trying to remember they said they taught you this. I think it was in dental school that they taught you about like, hey, your hygiene or a hygienist should make, three times their whatever you're paying them an hour, right? So it's like this number of that was the profitability formula back in the day, right? Well, nowadays, do you feel like that still holds true? Do you think that that's still, if we're looking at hygiene as a profit center or as its own, kind of business construct, does that formula still work?
I think that's a minimum number. I think that's a number you need to break even within your hygiene department. So I think if you set the standard that low, then I think that's probably the level that they will perform. It's just like everything else in the dental practice. If you want to optimize your practice, and you need to know and learn how to optimize your hygiene department. So, the salaries or wages of hygienists have gone up significantly over the last couple of years. We've heard anywhere from as low as maybe $40 to $45 an hour, now up to what as high as we've heard, maybe $80
No,
an hour.
95 in California.
95. So if that's the case, and you're doing three times, your hygienist should be producing $300 an hour, more or less. And so it really needs to be, you really need to take a look at this. And I think that needs to be a minimum. Like that needs to be your base of what you're paying your hygienist. That should be the base. The three times should be the base of at least the minimum amount of what they should be producing.
Okay, so if that's the case, then what should be, if it's say you're paying because a national average right now is hovering around $45 an hour. So what would you say to someone that is coming in and that they're saying, hey, Jared, I pay my hygienist $50 an hour. What would we expect? What should I expect? Or what should I build out as far as a goal for my team? What's a realistic expectation in hygiene today?
That's a great question. So, excluding the outliers like parts of California that are crazy expensive, I think an average pay for hygienists across the nation is around $45 an hour, like you were saying. So I think, and what we've seen within our practices is that the hygiene production per hour should be right around $200 an hour. I think that's a very easy, doable, not to say easy, it's a very doable number. It may seem high, but once you take everything, and here's what you have to take into consideration when considering your hygienist production per hour is what are they doing? What are they getting credit for?
Right.
So the hygienists are getting credit for their services, right? Obviously, either Profi or the perio maintenance, whatever service that they do. Plus, they should get services for the X-rays if they take the X-rays. They should get services for the fluoride if they place fluoride. Um, but what if they sell a product? What if you have
Like a bleach, like a bleach or a mouth rinse or what, an electric toothbrush or whatever, right?
right, right. So as far as products go, like our markup on our products are so minimal and so small that we don't count that as production. So for production for hygienists, we count, and I think that this is okay if they whatever service they provide. If they provide fluoride, if they do some sealants, if they do scale and replaning, if they do profuse, if they take X-rays, I think those are the services that they should get credit for. That when the doctor comes in and do the exam, that should be walked out under the doctor. He comes in and does that service. So it's being fair. I think with just doing those services that we mentioned, they should be able to hit the 200 to 225 per hour or per patient goal. That's very achievable as we've seen.
Okay, so you just kind of opened up an interesting discussion point and one that I've had with more than one office. For some reason, they say we seem to be in Utah that I have this conversation. I don't know why, but and it's this the point of that number is not to become unethical. I think it's extremely important that we address this, that this is an ethical, that you do things ethically, you run your business ethically, you don't bill out for something, some crazy, procedure. We're not advocating for someone to send their hygiene team to go learn some, who knows what hoopa-joop kind of hoodoo voodoo procedures and then charge an arm and a leg for it or whatever. Not even just and ethical billing as well. This is super important that we address this because on more than one occasion when I've said, "Oh, your hygiene production per hour is $120 an hour. You guys should be closer to 200." And they're like, "Well, like why? What are you saying that we have to sell? What are you saying that they need to be doing in addition?" And I think that this is really important that we're saying nothing. Nothing. They are supposed to be coming in, doing we're talking the normal expectations of a hygiene team, right? So we're not talking about these extraneous crazy procedures. We're talking about adult pros, child pros, SRPs, perio maintenance, x-rays, fluoride applications. And it's important to understand that if those things are done to an optimized level, we should expect to see that $225 per hour production per visit by the hygiene team. So I think that that's really important that we kind of hit that because I don't want anybody listening to this being like, oh, well, they want us to go do, want our hygiene team to go do something that they don't want to do. And that's also, by the way, that is not assisted hygiene. I think it's important that we address that we're not, against assisted hygiene in any way, but these numbers are based on unassisted hygiene. So I think it's important to bring that up.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I think it's important to note that, yeah, the hygienists are doing just what is best for the patient. So I will say this: if your pricing is too low, meaning if you're in the 20th or 30th percentile, you're probably not going to hit those numbers. You're probably going to be a little low. And we are talking production, so not collections. You are going to write a certain percentage of this off if you're contracted with an insurance company or if you have a patient benefit plan or some sort of in-office plan. And that's okay. If you want to look at the adjusted production rate, that's a different number. But this is for ease of pulling the information and finding the information. We just look at production per visit, and I think that's
Yep,
important to note too.
totally. And again, if you guys aren't using some type of data software, this is going to be kind of a pain to track. It is possible to do it through your Open Dental or your Dentrix or your EagleSoft or whatever. It is possible to pull these percentages and to figure this out. But man, if you're using again, a data analytics software, it's going to have it ready made for you. So, again, a plug for those companies, and we really believe in that. That's something that will make life a lot easier. So, okay, what goes in then into the profitability model? If we exclude all the, peripheral crazy stuff, and we're just talking about bread and butter hygiene, what goes into that hygiene profitability, and how does somebody increase it?
Yeah, you can't improve what you're not tracking. We've said this before. You have to track it
Yeah.
and measure it, right? So it starts off with education with your hygiene department, and it starts off with expectations and setting goals and saying, look, this is what at X practice at Woodriver Dental Care, this is what we are striving for. This is what we think is how we are going to serve our patients the best. And so we set a meeting every Monday morning where we just meet with the hygiene department and we just review all of these KPIs. We review the hygiene production per visit, and we review the overall as a team, and then we review it individually because you can look at your hygiene team production per visit maybe 190. Well, you could have one person doing 220 and one person doing 170 or 160, and that's a huge discrepancy that's bringing the whole team down. So we look at the entire team in general, and then we break it down individually with all the hygienists that are there, and me. I sit down in the room with them and say, okay, Hey Shayla, your production per visit this week was 243. Beth, yours was 241. Danielle, yours was 217. Whatever it is, and if there's an outlier, then we talk about it. We don't shame anybody. We don't make anybody feel bad. We say, hey, yours seems to be a little bit lower. What happened this week? And there could be a legitimate reason. And that's why you look at it on a weekly basis, but you really only get worried about it if you're seeing a trend over a couple weeks or a month or a quarter. That's when you start to make adjustments to it. So if you're looking at it on a weekly basis and one person has a lower week, they may say, you know what? I didn't have hardly any x-rays this week. Nobody was due for x-rays this week. Well, that's going to bring their production per visit down, which isn't a problem because the next week they're probably going to have more x-rays than the other hygienist. That's going to bring them up. What you look at is trends over weeks and over a quarter. And if over a quarter, if somebody is consistently $30, $40 below in production per visit, someone's producing 240 and others are 200 or 190, that's when you're like, okay, what's going on? What happened last quarter? What are some things that you're not catching? And so the hygiene production per visit is an overall view. Then you break it down. You say, okay, what percentage of our visits last week were perio visits, right? So we have built in perio visits into our schedule, so they can plan on scheduling the perio visits. Those get filled in with prophies at the last minute if necessary, but we hold them until the day of or the day before, and then we fill them in with prophy if necessary. But if you want to have 25-30% of your visits be perio visits, then you need to schedule that out. You can't expect your perio percentage numbers to be 25-30% if you have 6 months of prophies scheduled out. Then you're going to be like, oh, why didn't we hit our visit? Well, that's because you filled them all in with prophies. So that's a hard thing about discipline, is keeping those blocks open until the last minute and then filling those in. So you've got your overall production per visit, then you have your perio visits, and then you have your fluoride percentage, okay? And then you have your x-rays that are taken. I mean, we don't look at that on a weekly basis. We don't have a metric for that. We just look at the overall production, and we will look to that if somebody's lower in production. Say, hey, did we miss any x-rays? Did we ever get their pano every 3 to 5 years, whatever your process is? And we look at that, and then we also break down the perio diagnosed and perio accepted. Because if you're not diagnosing anything at all, then you're not going to be growing that program. And if you think that you're not diagnosing because your patients are super healthy, that's probably wrong. Just going to give you a little pro tip. If you haven't had any perio diagnosed in the last 3 weeks or month, you're probably not being thorough enough, And I'm not saying full mouth quadrants. So those I would say rarely those full, those patients come in where they haven't been in 6 years or 7 years, and maybe they need full mouth. So I'm talking like patients come in, they've been missing an area, they've got a pocket, a two, and maybe one quadrant where they have fives, fours, fives. Don't just go clean those. That patient needs to be aware and told, hey, you have this area where we're missing, and it's causing some damage. We need to spend a little more time. We need to do a little isolated SRP 1 to 3 in this area, and then we need to reevaluate you in 6 months and make sure we stay on track of this and have that conversation. Your hygienists need to be comfortable having those conversations with those patients, and if they're scared, then they're not going to diagnose it. And if you, as a dentist, if you're the leader of your practice, if you come in and you dismiss their probing depth, oh, we'll just clean that up. You're setting the standard for that hygienist, and you're letting him or her down, really, and not setting them up for success to be able to correctly diagnose and treat perio as it should be treated. So all of those things go into the hygiene production per visit and need to be looked at on a weekly basis for the hygiene profitability in the hygiene department side.
Yeah. So yeah. So some smart scheduling. So set up smart scheduling so that you have. So look, man. You just gave a lot of KPIs, a lot of things to look at, right? Because we need to begin by looking at, okay, what is the current hygiene production per visit? Where are we at with that? Where do we match up on a national average? And again, there's a lot of market variability there. So I'm going to get into the formula on how to set that goal here in just a second. But we want to look at our baseline. We want to look at, okay, what is our perio percentage? Are we below the eight ball or behind the eight ball on that? Are we below standard on that? So 30% is the national average or the standard. How far below? And again, there's market variability on that as well. But we want to look at that and say, okay, are we underperforming in our perio? Are we not scheduling out time for SRPs within our schedule because there's nowhere to put them if you don't do that? And then you want to obviously be tracking reappointment, pre-appointment. We want to look at all of the fluoride that, we want to track fluoride percentages. So those are the things that you're saying, okay, this is how we can increase our profitability, is by starting with baselining those things. And so now once you have your baseline, and I want to talk a little bit for a second on the formula for setting your goal. And what we've noticed, there's a shortcut here. I'm going to start with the shortcut. Is, if you have a few hygienists in your office, maybe 3-4 hygienists, this is a lot easier to do this shortcut. Take a look and find, run the numbers and see what the benchmark high or the high water mark is for production per visit based on your hygiene team. And if they're hitting, 200, 220, something like that, somewhat consistently, if you have that outlier, you have that one that's hitting that 200, 220 or whatever. I'm just using arbitrary numbers right now. And then the rest of the team is at 120 or 115. What is possible within that office. It is possible for the entire team to hit 220, 215. You will need to reverse engineer that a little bit and figure out, okay, why were they hitting that number? But that's a shortcut. So you can really quickly go, we are not meeting our potential in performance in our hygiene office, right? So the more realistic way to do it in a longer form, but and this is probably the formula that most people are going to have to find, is that you're going to have to start with the KPIs that you were just talking about, Jared. So you got to start off and look and say, okay, where are fees? Are our fees in line with our zip code? Are our fees correct to our area? Or are we super low? And if it's super low by design, then you've got to work around that. But if it's just super low because you've been negligent, that's different. Now you got to take a look at that and say, okay, so where are our fees in line or line up? And then the next step is to go, okay, where are we on our x-rays, on our radiographs? Are our patients receiving radiographs on a regular interval like they're supposed to be getting? And again, if you have data analytics, you'll be able to look at that and know that pretty quickly. And once you have figured out, okay, we don't have a problem there, or we do have a problem there, then you want to look at your fluoride percentage. Are we high, low, regular? Are we in an average on fluoride? And then once you've figured that out, you want to be able to go and look and say, okay, where are we at on perio? As far as how many of our perio patients we've diagnosed, yes, but are we getting them back in? And then, do you have a scheduling issue like what you were just talking about? And once you've done that, you can go in and look and just figure out, okay, if we charge out for an adult, if we do an adult pro, a 7CDX or FMX, whatever your office does, an occasional pano, again, those aren't going to be your big money makers because those are every 5 years, and that there's not a lot of panels that come through in any given day. But radiographs, I think, is the important note there. Look at your pricing and look at your fluoride. If you do those, then you can say, okay, if we're charging these things at a fair and a UCR, right? So a fair rate, and we do those things, what does that equal up to? And based on that, you should be able to figure out, okay, this is where we should be hitting on a regular basis. So that's a quick and dirty formula to kind of help. It's not super fast to if you don't have data analytics, finding that goal is going to be a pain in the butt. Say that right now, because you're going to have to go digging, and you're going to send your office manager on a wild goose chase trying to find these numbers. So again, we don't get any type of. We should get there should be a sponsorship package where we have Tide and like P&G and Dental Intel or something like that. I feel like we pimp some of these companies more than we get back, but we don't get anything from supporting these companies, but they are valuable. So please, if you're not using data analytics, use data analytics. You can figure out stuff like this. But that's kind of a formula to figure out if you don't have, a good baseline to figure out where your goal should be. That's a formula that will help you to figure that out.
Yeah, and I also I think it's important to note here, Dan, too, that our process for reviewing all of that, because that's a ton of information. You need to have somebody in your office that's in charge of pulling all that information, going into dental intel, and instead of trying to navigate all those separate windows all the time, you should decide which KPIs you want to take a quick glance at and pull them and put them into a scorecard. So this is how we do it at Wood River Dental Care. We hired a college student, happened to be my son, and he goes into dental intel on Sunday night. And what he does is he pulls all the KPIs that we've asked him to pull, and he puts it into a scorecard. Now, the software that we use is called Bloom Growth. You can use whatever you want, and again, we should have a Bloom Growth patch on our shoulder or whatever, because it's important. But we use Bloom Growth, and we put all that information into a scorecard. Then on Monday morning, we have our hygiene meeting where we have, we got Shayla, we have Danielle, we have Beth, we have Caroline, and then we have that KPI and how they did last week. And so we're not going through individually and trying to put in the all the information. It's all pulled for us, and we just glance at it and we review it. And if it's great, we celebrate it. If it's not, we make an issue of it and we talk about it later. But that way, that allows you to go through all these KPIs in a short amount of time. And that way, if you're on a great track, if your hygiene team is doing awesome, if they're producing all 220, 200, 225 per visit, don't waste time on it. Celebrate it. Nice job, hygiene department. You had a great week last week. Let's move on. Fluoride. Oh, awesome. We did great. Oh, Beth, yours is a little lower. Let's talk about it, or maybe in the issue section. But you need to have a system or a way of reviewing all of that data in a scorecard real quickly, so you know where to focus your time and effort onto those things. Because this data review, we talk about it, Dan, like it's no big deal. But for an office that isn't systemized and have that set up ready to go, it could be kind of this major. It could be a major block, a roadblock, right?
Totally.
It could be
Totally. It's too
overwhelming.
overwhelming. I 100% agree. Like,
Yeah,
just as I'm talking about it, I'm like in my head, I'm like, well, if you're just
yeah,
walking into this and if you're just listening to this and I'm rattling off all these, like, this is the formula for it. And you're like, I don't even know how to find one of those freaking numbers. Like,
exactly.
I'm screwed. Like, there is a way you can work through it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Like, having someone assigned, getting your accountability set up correctly, that's huge. Like, making sure that you have the team to support you. Again, there's third party people like us that are out there that can help out with this kind of stuff. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't feel like you're getting bulldozed by the industry and by just the tracking and data itself. There is help. There's ways to work through it. You don't have to go it alone, and I think that's important. Um, I did want to. We're not going to have time to talk about it on this one, Jared, and I think maybe we'll kick it over to the other one. But just the role of exams, of hygiene exams and treatment case acceptance. Having the team
Yeah.
support you in co-diagnosing and understanding, like being able to be an efficient team with you. So your hygienist and you working together to do case presentation and treatment presentation, I think is huge. And having them sometimes is more valuable than us because unfortunately we are looked at, even the most altruistic dentist is often looked at under a dim light because they're like, oh, he's just the owner. She's just the owner. She just wants to take my money, blah, 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 which you and I both know that's not true. But unfortunately, that's how we're looked at. So if the hygienist comes in and is like, supports what we diagnose, supports what we see, supports what we say, I think that that's really important. Or sets us up beforehand. Hey, doc, I noticed that, there's a big radiolucency on the distal number 3 and, the patient's having this or the patient's feeling this. I think that it might need a crown. It might need a filling, whatever it is, that sets you up. So there's a lot of team training that goes into this that we're just barely glazing over because right now we're focusing on the KPIs, but there's a much more to the periphery of the hygiene team and making it profitable than just the KPIs. But we're going to focus on just the KPIs today.
Yeah,
You had
the that is a KPI, the that we'll focus on another time because it deserves a lot more attention. The case acceptance within the hygiene department is incredibly important because a well-led hygiene team will really empower patients to take ownership of their oral health. That drives loyalty. It drives long-term care.
yeah.
And if they're understanding that we are being incredibly thorough, our hygienists care so much about your hygiene that they are watching out for you. And if they become your advocate as a patient, when the doctor walks in the room, they're like, I'm so worried about this tooth. We're cleaning it but these fracture lines are just like, it's probably going to be an issue. What do you think we should do about it, Dr. Hill? That is the best case scenario that I could think of. Then there's not even any sort of, you don't have to convince anybody of anything. At that point in time, the patient is asking, Dr. Hill, can you fix this? Can you do something for this before it becomes an issue? That is a powerful office right there. That is helping the patients take ownership of their own healthcare, which is the ultimate goal of what we want as dental professionals. But yeah, us dive into that further into the next podcast.
You had an example, didn't you? You were thinking of the off. We have an office that we work with, a small office here in Idaho, in a small town that you wanted to kind of talk about. I want you to nice little success story, I think, right?
Yeah, this is a great way to maybe wrap up this thing is a case study, if you will, or a success story of an office. There's a practice we love to work with. The owner is a really great friend of ours. He practices in a small town of Idaho, a rural town, a very not rich town. Poor, matter of fact, probably demographically, probably one of the poorest towns in all of Idaho. And when we started looking at his KPIs and we
Wait,
took his,
wait. Did you say it's one of the worst towns in Idaho?
not, I didn't say worst. Did I say worst? I One of the poorest. I actually love this town. My mom is from this town, so it has a near and dear place to my heart. But it's not rich, right? It's like, and so a lot of people think that, I live in an area where there's it's not affluent. Okay, well, the patients can't afford it. That's not true, right? You've got to put that out of your mind. You have to provide the value for it. So when we started to look at his data and his information, took his baseline, his team was producing $140 per hour. That was his hygiene production per visit, not per hour, per visit was $140. And so at first we thought we told him, we could probably get this thing up to maybe 190 or 200. He didn't believe us. He's like, nah, that's crazy. We're doing all that we can right now. And so we sat down with him and we worked with him and his team. We had Dan, you give a great presentation called the Perio Paradigm for these offices you'll sit down with the hygiene team and the owner and just talk about perio and talk about the importance of hygiene, talk about how important the hygienists are to the team, how their productivity is a direct reflection of how well the systems are running, the communication, scheduling protocols are working in the office. You have these conversations with them, and these hygienists then start to understand the importance of their role, their value in the practice. And then we start to measure. We measure with the doctor on a weekly basis how it's going. And over the last 2 years, his hygiene team is now producing 204 or 205 now production per visit, and that is not. It's not. They're not adding procedures. They're simply coding things correctly. They're walking things out correctly. They have their pricing structure corrected. They're taking all the X-rays they need to. They're talking about the benefits of fluoride or whatever the sealants, whatever the patient needs. Like they're having these conversations that are helping these patients now take care of or take ownership of their own overall health. So it's the investing in your hygiene team like this is the best way for you to see returns in both really lives changed and revenue earned. So your patients are going to change through the hygiene department. And yes, it's gonna result in increased revenue, which is a benefit. There's no question. We run a for-profit business, and that's we're always looking for more revenue. But the driving force is that you're changing lives, and you're empowering your hygiene team to do it. So this was one example. I would say that probably with almost every office we work with, this meter moves probably faster than most other ones. I think this is the most under producing department in every dental office, almost every dental office.
I'm still hung up on the worst town in Idaho. I gotta be honest. Like my that's and I'm really curious now as our EA members listen to this, which one of them is going to think that we're talking about them? That's
Let's not tell them about this episode.
well, I 100% agree, and love the example. And it's super achievable. This is something that I think a lot of times it's neglected because it's just there, right? And it's considered, unfortunately, for some practices, even a loss leader, like you were saying earlier. And it doesn't have to be. This should be an asset to your practice. It should be something that is not money vacuum, but instead a profit builder and a revenue builder. So. Please, if anybody has questions about this stuff, we dumped a lot into this episode. There's a lot to digest here, and probably some of it feels a little bit foreign. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at elevationassociation@gmail.com, or check out our website at elevationassociation.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, so you can reach out to us there. Ryan, Jared, and I don't hide our profiles. We're available, via social media if you want to get hold of us there. So cool, man. I kind of want to get into the controversial stuff on hygiene, so I'm excited to be chatting about that soon. Any parting thoughts or last thoughts before we sign off?
No, just join a community, not a corporation. At Elevation Association, we work with each other and we help each other. We don't have any vested interest in any practices. We don't buy your practice. No, none of that happens. We're all really just wanting you to do your best and be your best, and join our community. We have a collaboration community called School, SKOOL, where we have some great discussions. We have some clinical discussions. We have business discussions. We have life discussions. We have legacy discussions. We have opportunities to learn. We have CE opportunities. So that's a great way to get involved at a very minimal entry barrier. And so get to know us. Go to our website. We'd love to have you guys check us out and join the community, join the tribe. So thank you.
Yeah, be sure to join us next time where we offend other small towns throughout the United States. Until then, see you later.
Until then, adios.